Call to order, City Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, December 17th, 2019. It's about 5:37. Our first item is good of the order. I just wanted to mention that IT won't be here tonight. They're usually here at the beginning of our meeting, but they'll be here at our next meeting. And Jody, you had something as well for the good of the order?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I was updating some bios of councils on the website this week because of the elections, updating term dates and all that, and noticed that some of you don't have bios, but the ones I've written, some of you do, may want to update them. So if you are interested, just email me what you want your bio to say, and I will get it uploaded onto the web. That's it.
Anyone else for good of the order? Jennifer?
I have a couple items. The first one, I don't know if everyone here on council heard, but there was a pretty scary incident that involved a school bus and a driver, and it happened on 203 a couple weeks ago. And a rock, not gravel, like a giant rock, came off the truck and broke the front window of the bus and hit the bus driver. And it's a miracle, honestly, that she was able to keep control of the vehicle, and there weren't any kids on the bus, but she had to be taken to the hospital and stitches, concussion. It was very serious. And through this situation, it's been discovered that there is a little bit of a loophole on the Cover Your Law, Maria's Law. Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, just reading kind of some articles about the history, that there's this provision that says if you're carrying dirt, sand, or gravel, that if it's below 6 inches from the edge of the truck, you don't have to have cover on it. And from the article I read, the person who wrote the article, they interviewed someone with King County, I can't remember, and I can tell you, but I don't want to waste the time. But if you want the article, I can send it to you. But they said that part of the reason that exception was put in there because a lot of the trucks had not been retrofitted yet, and they wanted to give them time to conform to the new law. But the intention was that that would not remain that way forever, that eventually everyone should cover their truck. So anyway, what's interesting though is how do you define gravel? Because clearly what hit her was not gravel. Mm-hmm. It was a very large rock / boulder, it was big. So the question is, what can we do? Can we advocate for this? It sounds like it's a known problem that they're still having rocks, things flying out of these large gravel trucks. And anyway, I don't know if Chief Hurt wants to comment on it, or if it's something that, we could write a letter and all sign on and just ask that this be reviewed. Because I know a lot of those trucks are coming through our town. And at this point, it's possibly we can't stop and cite them because of this loophole.
Correct, and I think there is legislation coming out again for that very thing.
Okay.
You would know probably better than I do, but the thing about the 6-inch rule is if you hit a pothole or something in the road, if it's not covered, it doesn't matter if it's a foot below, it can fly out. So it's a huge flaw to use. I have to cover the bed on my pickup truck when I go to the garbage dump, or they find me at the dump. It's crazy.
Is this something that we could show our support as a city, since we do have a lot of these trucks go through here? Maybe we can sign on and write a letter to our legislators saying we support this, or?
As Councilmember Naplin and I discussed on Friday, I actually know the lobbyist that actually pushed through the original Maria's Law. He's been out of the country for the last few weeks and committed to giving him a phone call, as well as talking to Larry Springer, and if there's 2 people that want to contact Monka Dinger and Roger Goodman to tag team, that would be great to get the conversation going. But I think it is best to prep with a phone call rather than to get a letter blindsided. But as like our phone call last Friday, especially if there is legislation forthcoming, that's something we can pretty simply add to our legislative agenda. And it has become more of an issue over the last few years. It's pretty common for me personally to be driving Woodinville Duval Road or Novelty Hill or 203 or even Highway 2, and loads that should be covered and they have the covers, just aren't using them. And I have seen rocks fly out. I've taken pictures and contacted companies, or contacted State Patrol when necessary. And it's a very challenging issue to deal with when, especially if you can't patrol some of these roads that don't have places to patrol, even if they are breaking the existing law. But yeah, I mean, it's becoming a bigger issue again. And so the legislature definitely does need to, I think, take another look at it and see what can be fixed to make it actually work.
Thank you. Yeah, and we did talk about it, but I was thinking, could there be something as a council we could do to show our support for making some kind of change?
I have a question. Was it on a city street?
It was on 203, but most likely that vehicle either had or would, I think they were coming from Duval and she was heading north. So I believe it would have traveled through Duval, most likely.
Yeah.
So within city
Well,
limits at some
yeah,
point
I
on
mean,
203.
I suppose there's another thing we could do if it's not inconsistent with state law, which is toughen up our own laws and let our police officers find the heck out of them.
I don't know, I kind of had a
You
feeling
can't-
maybe we couldn't. What, Chief Hurd? Are
You
we?
can
Yeah,
add, you can add the laws as a city, but you can't take away from the existing law, so we can't supersede what the
Right.
RCW says, so.
But could we have a fine within the city?
But probably not on a state highway, correct?
Not on a state highway, but on city roads.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our jurisdiction, right?
Probably similar to the Jake brake ordinance, I would guess, the engine brake ordinance.
I mean, I'm not suggesting we necessarily wade into that, but if something doesn't happen, maybe there's some other things we can do to give our officers, because I can tell you this in more urban areas, if you get caught hauling a load without, the cover, it can definitely be something that's acted on, so maybe.
It could be something we consider, just contemplating all of the clearing and grading and different trucks that are coming in and out of our city streets. If we could at least make sure they are covered when they leave, it would potentially take care of some of the traffic heading up and down 203. But anyway, I didn't mean, we can add it to an agenda, I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, I would personally love to discuss it more at some point and do some research and just talk about options. I mean, personally, we've had to replace windshields 3 times in the last 5 years, so.
Mine is
just
broken
trying-
right now.
Yeah. So I'd be all for talking about that, certainly the safety aspect as well.
Thanks for bringing it up. It sounds like there's pretty widespread support for supporting any legislation in Olympia to say, let's get this statewide and make sure all loads are secured and covered. But it sounds like there's also an opportunity for us to consider, especially if we're doing clearing and grading, to add a code that would, to our own city, that would say, you're doing work in the city, you've got to cover your load, period. So I think that both those might be a good way for us to go.
I'd love to see that. I had one other thing, I'll try to be quicker on this one, but it was mentioned at a meeting, a community member brought up the level 3 sex offender that is scheduled to be released, and the understanding is that he would live with his mother out by Lake Joy. And just reading about this offender in particular, it's violent abduction, and a level 3 sex offender is, at high risk to reoffend. So it was suggested, someone in the community had suggested there were different people to contact, and the specific thing you could ask for would be, could we have him reevaluated on whether there needs to be a civil commitment? And I guess they go through that process, and one thing is you could say, hey, I'd really like a reevaluation potentially. I also talked to Mary Oberlander about it, and she had some ideas of contacting people, but I do think this in particular, I feel compelled to try to speak out for our community. So even though they wouldn't be living inside city limits, it's certainly within close range, and I'd like to advocate in some way. But I wanted to just bring it to your attention. I do have a picture where someone out by Lake Joy kind of listed some of the potential ways you could advocate. just wanted to bring that up, just kind of a follow-up.
I can share with you at another time of what happened in the city with level 3s and how we handled it.
So, anyway, I don't know if, Mayor, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I mean, Chief might have something to add.
Or Chief.
It's not a fun situation for anyone, and the unfortunate part, I was apparently quoted in the Woodinville Weekly on it from our last meeting, but once somebody's served their time, our options are limited, especially when they're not in our jurisdiction. In fact, this person is moving in across the street from a friend of mine. So it does hit home. I'm there a few times a year. And my particular concern in specific is that the violent sexual crimes. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place unless he can get reevaluated. Chief, you can answer more. Unless he gets reevaluated or does something to violate his parole, our hands are tied. And that makes it really difficult. But I think part of it is, the reality is that there are far more sex offenders living in our community that have never been charged with crimes than those that have been put in jail. And it's a sad, cold, hard reality, but it's very true. And so this brings a level of awareness, I think, to all parents that we do need to be careful about where our children are going, who they're with, how well we know people, because the most common actions of sexual abuse and assault are by people that are known to the victims. And oftentimes those crimes are not reported. And I think this should, if we take anything from this right now, knowing that what we can and can't do, I think it should be a community awareness that these people are living amongst us, whether you think so or not, and that they may be your next door neighbor. You don't know unless they've been convicted of a crime, unless somebody's reported them and they've been convicted. So I think that's a good opportunity to draw attention to overall safety of children and women in particular. But beyond that, I don't know what else to add.
No, so a level 3, I don't believe is out yet, right?
Said release sometime in December, so I don't know what date that is.
So the King County Sheriff's Office should be conducting a community outreach with the residents, especially in Lake Joy, in an immediate area. And then I believe a level 3 they're required monthly to monitor and check in on these folks. Again, it's probably not a lot of reassurance for people that are living in the area, but like the mayor said, I mean, we have to assume that the judicial system is doing the right things, and if the guy screws up, certainly he'll eventually get put back where he was. But it's not fun. We have registered sex offenders that live in our city. They don't cause any problems. We have several.
Yeah, I looked at the list and just looking at the crime, this particular was an abduction of two, a young teen girl and another woman, and it was, I don't believe that they were known to the perpetrator, and it was attempted murder. Actually, he assumed that he had murdered when he left them. And so it's, not that it makes it any better, that it, it's still bad when it's someone who commits a crime against someone they know, but I think that what's a little scary about this situation is he went out and found just a girl who was, I think, waiting in line somewhere. Anyway, I don't want to go into details. It just, this feels especially worrisome, in my opinion, as a parent of a 14-year-old daughter.
I do want to say I really appreciate, even though it's not in our jurisdiction, I think most of us that live in the greater Duval community realize that it's not just Duval. We advocate for things outside as well. And I really appreciated a couple of the community members coming to council last week and bringing it up. And even though, we had to inform them that it's not technically in the city limits, but it doesn't mean we still can't be a positive force as a council to advocate to make sure the rules are being enforced, that if there's regular meetings or as the chief mentioned, having a community outreach, and that those basic things are being done at the very least, so that the community is aware. I think that the mayor mentioned the other really important piece. You hate to do it in this day and age, but just educating ourselves as well as our children about, the dangers, and just being, especially online, always being aware and traveling in twos. There's a lot of things that you can reinforce to help assure their safety.
I have a quick one.
Amy?
I think it's quick.
Yes.
So I had reached out to a couple people in local sports and asked about potentially what if council members wanted to show our support for local kids and volunteer at some of the sporting events. And they thought that sounded fun. I wanted to gauge your guys' interest if you're interested in that. I do think you have to be a PTSA member, so it's normally pretty nominal, isn't it? It's under $30 for sure, which is an annual fee, as you all probably know. So I just wanted to see if that is something you guys are interested in. I could get more information and let you know upcoming dates that they would need some extra volunteers at sporting events. Council cares. I can make t-shirts.
Would you mind just sending the information
Sure,
out?
I can do that.
I always say, what do we need to do? If you want to get involved, what do we do? And always what the commitment is. So what do they need volunteers? Is it
Right.
traffic in the parking lot, or
Right.
helping at a special event to set up?
Probably a
or
little
take
bit of
down?
everything.
Yeah.
Concessions is a big one, so.
Yeah. And then somebody to contact, so that if council wants to get involved, everyone has different interests in the, personal interests, and I'm sure especially we've got council members who kids are probably already volunteered, but even for us old guys, kids are growing, our grandkids are in the schools here, so it's nice to be able to give back and help out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Others, do the order? Well, we can move on to our next item, which is standing committees. We had talked in the summer and fall about setting up committees, and formally, we already have those. There's 4 or 5 committees that are already written into council procedures, but we worked with our first one, which was finance administration. Early in December, the chief realized that there was a lot going on with PD, union contracts, and other things that were going to be significant enough that he thought he'd really encourage us to move forward with a public safety committee. So he had brought it up to the mayor. She seemed supportive. I've talked to some council members that are very interested in serving. Certainly we already have 3 members on the finance administration. I'm bringing it up tonight. I wanted to just kind of gauge interest in that. And out of respect for the chief's request, to see if council would like to go ahead and probably at the first of the year, would probably be over Christmas, but be able to move forward a little bit sooner with the public safety committee. Chief, do you want to say
I
anything
have
about it?
just a handout for you, Mike, if the council member, just to give everybody an idea of kind of what's coming up in the next 6 months.
So here's a list the chief's got: full-time SRO, interlocal agreement, part-time SRO, liaison negotiations with Riverview School District, the camping ordinance. We do have some folks camping in town. In parks, union negotiations start summer of 2020, and funding options for sustainability of public safety operations. I think most of these we've talked about before, including the last item about, are there ways to improve funding to help cover those costs. It's a substantial part of our budget for our public safety police operations. So I applaud the chief. One is encouraging us to move forward with something we've already looked at and talked about doing. And I just wanted to gauge interest. Is anyone, I guess I'll ask this way, is anyone opposed to trying to move this forward sometime after the first of the year so that we could have a public safety committee operating sooner than waiting till a February retreat where we might formalize it? Any concerns? I don't see any concern. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I mean, I guess, since we don't know which committees will be formed, it might be, I'm guessing most council members will probably end up being on 2 committees and just not knowing exactly which committees will be formed. I don't know, it would be interesting to see exactly, I don't know.
I think that was our original plan, let's do all the committees at one time, and then we kind of figure out who, really, even if you look at our own policy on committees, it says right in there, pretty point blank, the most important thing is who wants to be on the committee. And who's got the interest and says, yeah, that's something I want to do. And it's tough to gauge just one at a time, and maybe call it piecemealing. On the other hand, I think we realized we had some significant issues with finance, and we wanted to be able to kind of dive in right away. It also gave us a chance to kind of get our feet wet. But also appreciate that, you know, we can take them one at a time. I know we had talked to Steve about trying to get Public Works up and running. We do have some others that are on the books with economic and, you know, so there's some others as well. I think there might be some wisdom in starting a few and not trying to have all of them at one time so we don't overwhelm staff. But that point I think Jennifer's making is really important. You know, how do we go about it and try to make it consistent? Dot?
I would like to see the Public Safety Committee move as fast as possible. There's a lot of places in here where there's, you know, the synergy with finance, and but the main thing is, I've just seen this be so important in communities, not just here, but in other places, and we have a lot to celebrate with our police officers and how they perform, and there's some really good issues on this list around sustainability, which has been an ongoing topic at the council level. So, you know, you know, if people don't want to do it right away, that's fine, but I'm comfortable moving with public safety sooner than later.
I think it's fine to move forward, because if the chief has put it forward, these seem to be important things that we shouldn't wait to get them started. We should start having that conversation. If there's a committee that's willing to come together, I'm fully happy to be on the committee and work with the chief on this, the committee members, so.
Amy?
So I'm excited about this committee. I would love to serve on it. I'll just put that out there. But I'm okay with it moving forward sooner rather than later. However, to Jennifer's point, I'm wondering if we can find a compromise, because it might be too late to wait until the retreat in February, but maybe if we can just dedicate a little slice of a cow in the 1st of January to just talk a little bit more quickly about committees and which ones of these are the ones, you know, not to take the wind out of the sails of the retreat in February. I'm sure we have other things to talk about too, but maybe we could just talk a little bit more about it, but then get it, you know, rolling pretty quick after that.
Yeah. Mary?
So I just want to say, you know, when Chief brought this up when we talked about it, it was a no-brainer for me, because there's definitely a lot of work on the public safety side coming up for this coming year. And Chief did have some recommendations as to who he would like to see on the committee. And I would ask that council accept those recommendations so that he can start moving forward with the work that needs to be done. It's especially with negotiations starting to come up soon, that group needs to be formed sooner rather than later. And especially, we just had another issue brought up tonight that's perfect for actually public safety and public works to address, to evaluate feasibility of an ordinance within the town, and what's the ability to enforce an ordinance with covered loads in town with our officers as well, since a lot of their patrolling is, you know, Main Street. So I think that, you know, I would really appreciate moving forward as the chief has requested, with the membership he's requested, so that he can start having those conversations with people and start moving it forward.
Can I make one more point? In that, in the past, we've set up committees in the past, and when we come together in the retreat, basically what we're doing in that retreat is just, people want to move committees. They want, like, someone wants to go from one committee to another, and we sort of have that discussion. That's pretty much all that it's all about. So if we start a safety committee and we have the finance committee, and then at February there is a conversation and people want to move places, that's kind of more, that's what that's for.
Thanks.
That's part of our policy, where once a year we take a look, and folks may say, hey, I've got other interests, or I've kind of run through that and ready to do something new. So really yearly, we'll have that opportunity to take a look as well. Other feedback on it, Matt?
Yeah, I think there's definitely potential for, as we develop this committee structure, kind of unforeseen things that come up potentially. So I would just like to see it not necessarily be set in stone, that we remain flexible and, whether it's the finance committee or the public safety committee, because I think usually there's a way that you decide who's going to be on the committee. I don't foresee it's going to be an issue here, but I think that that's something that comes into play we haven't worked out yet. So that being said, I'm fine with moving forward with it, but I think we should remain flexible and consider the membership of said committees to be open until decided or final for the duration of that committee's commitment. And I guess lastly, while I appreciate staff's recommendations, I think it's really up to the council who serves on a committee and who would be best to serve on a committee. And I can't think of, and it's not an issue of disagreement, it's just an issue of process and practice. And I can't think of a city that asks a director who he would like to select to be on a committee. That's just irregular. And not to say that I'm not making any sort of statement of issue, it's not exactly a regular process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the retreat, which relates to this. I guess this is the first time that I've processed or maybe understood that we would not be having a retreat to February. And I just want to put in a pitch, the sooner the better on that, because there's so many issues. If there's a way to do it, closer into January even, I just think there's a lot of work to do, and I think the council itself has to sort of put together a work plan of its own about what it wants to move forward. There's some things Jody worked with us on, figuring a schedule for that, so we make sure we get that work done. So, in my mind, on the retreat, the sooner the better.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I usually like to give a little bit of time. We've rushed it a few times where it just makes it really tight trying to get everybody there in 30 days. But the point is really good. I think last year when I was asking Mayor Pro Tem, I sent out a note just saying, what's everybody's priorities? And I listed some items that had already come up from council. But I think yearly it's nice to do that and just kind of then work with the city on trying to line all that up. I think most of our priorities were already on the list from department directors and the mayor. But we do have quite a few things to be able to talk about and move forward, including committees and some of our policies that are related to that. There's some unfinished business from this year that we'll probably carry over to at least discuss. The agenda is up to council. It's council's retreat, an opportunity to discuss things. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that your input will be the most valuable thing. In terms of timing, I'm happy, Dot, to try to move that up sooner. Sometimes it's just a matter of logistics. Part of what's been on my mind is some of the decisions we make are related to finance, and I think it's going to take probably at least through January to have Dana get her feet on the ground, be able to get us some information so that we can start looking at things related to priorities. And then the last thing I'll mention regarding the retreat and the finance, it really is critical that we get started early as possible on the next 2-year budget. And that probably happens, it's up to the mayor, it's her budget that she brings forward, but my guess is discussions could easily start early spring, late winter. And so the sooner we do that as well, I think will be helpful. So all that kind of comes together. And I can send out a dual poll again. So does council want me to look at moving it up to January? I'm happy to do that.
I don't think it would hurt to include some January dates,
Dates.
because you never know what our collective availability will be, so maybe February doesn't work.
I do want to caution, if the dates are being moved up, we have staff to consider, especially since it's on a weekend. Many people are already making their weekend plans for January now, and we're in the middle of December. So if staff's already been told February, I think we need to be cognizant of that.
But it might not be a retreat that we need staff at too. I mean, that's up to the council to decide how they want that structured.
That is correct, however, staff was invited at the last minute last year, as was I, and most of us had commitments that we could not relinquish at that point.
Yeah, and I can easily check with staff too. I mean, I think that's part of my responsibility to make sure that, you know, if council wants staff there, that we give them plenty of notice so they can make plans.
At least 30 days. I do
Yeah.
not think for a weekend day, it is reasonable to expect a director to change plans within 30 days
Yeah, Matt?
for something that's an annual event.
Yeah, I think whatever we do, I don't think we should have a second December meeting, and I think we should be able to get through our business by
Yeah.
the beginning of December.
Yeah.
The last, I don't know, 6 weeks of
Pretty brutal.
meeting every Tuesday, I don't think I think we can schedule our way out of it.
Yeah.
So
I'm
whatever
happy
we
to-
do in the beginning of the year, I hope that it informs the end of the year,
Yeah,
because it comes every December.
yeah, good input. Michelle?
So regarding this public safety committee, I do think it's good to, because there is a need to maybe create this committee now. I think we're pretty close. We worked pretty hard on having policies for creating committees, and I think we should maybe work on that. I think that it's really important to go through the process and have the council make the decision who they want on the committees. I can say I'm not able to be on this committee right now, so I appreciate that we have some people that are interested, and it probably will work out just fine. I think we need to get the process and get our policy created for that.
I think there is so important that, you know, council decides who wants to be on there. And I think it can be formal, you know, there's committees, put your name in, and then we kind of work it out. It can also be pretty organic, you know, it sounds like we've got at least two. I've served on public safety committees in Bellevue and Kirkland and thoroughly enjoy it, but I don't feel like I'm God's gift to public safety and if others are interested. So it can be organic as well. You know, it really is that simple where who's able to do it, do we want to move forward? I'm getting the sense that there's a general consensus that we can move forward, not wait till a retreat in late January or February, but we can do it sooner. We certainly have 3 folks committed, but I think, Jennifer, you said something important. We'll probably all wind up being on at least, you know, 2 committees, depending on how many we form. So I go ahead.
I just want to say, I wasn't specifically interested on being, I will serve on whatever committee someone wants to be, but when I said that, it wasn't because I had intentions that I wanted to be on this committee. I just want to say it was more about the process of understanding which committees we would have so that people can make informed decisions.
Yeah, I think so too. And we haven't quite got to that point, although I think certainly having a public works committee is important. You know, in my own mind, I think about who's got background and interest, but you don't always align that way. Sometimes you may not have background, but have a lot of interest, and hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to learn more. I've always looked at Matt as an example. With his background, is just such a huge resource when it comes to, you know, public works and some of the very specific things. But it does get down to interest. So I'll ask again, I don't want to push it, but it just seems like we can do it organically. It sounds like there's at least 2 folks that would like to serve. Are there other folks that would like to serve on it as well?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, I
Yes.
just want to make clear that this is, while we do have obviously council committees, this is specifically mayor request as a result of administration to get this process up and going. So the request was specifically for the 3 council members that were asked, because most other council members are already on the existing committee. So council obviously has a committee process, as does the mayor. So this is coming from us requesting these people to be on this at this time. So chief can get his process moving forward.
So out of respect for what the mayor is saying, the chief has mentioned.
Who are the
Who are
people
the
that?
people?
No, and I'll let you know, I was looking for a little more organic process out of respect for wanting council members to be a part of it as well. But the mayor's brought up the point, so I have no problem. The chief just recognized there were 3 folks already serving on the committee. That left 4 folks. He kind of looked at, who might have time and interest, and he had brought up Amy and Diane and myself as folks that might want to be on there. But certainly at the end of the day, I think we all understand council kind of makes that final, but the mayor's right. The chief said, hey, I'd like to get it up and running, and here's 3 folks I think would be helpful. I don't think he was trying to leave anybody out. He was very clear that, I'm just trying to look at, who's already assigned and who might be available and interested.
This really is a council decision, and I think if we start a precedent that we're letting staff and the mayor decide who's on committees, I don't think that's a good,
So this is actually standard practice.
that is not, I don't believe, I'm sorry.
It is,
It's
we
not.
had, Diane can speak to all of the committees that we had over the multiple.
It may have been our standard practice, but that's not standard practice in other cities. That's not the way committees are formed. It's the council's decision who's on committees.
Yes, we used to do this all the time because of, people's schedules and everything, but if we have 2 people who are willing, and maybe a third, why can't we have that discussion? Because it's apparent that the chief has things he needs to get done, and we don't want to hold up the business of the city. Why can't we make that decision? If the council wants to decide, they can decide, can't they? Like in a form of.
But we're not being asked to decide, we're being told to decide.
Well, there was a request, I don't know that they're being told to decide, there was a request from staff, and that is something we practiced in the past, because I'm not sure why the chief made that decision, but I'm definitely interested, because I think that here, funding options for sustainability of public safety operations is very important to me. That's an important item of sustainability.
Great if you want to be on the committee. I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with this starting to be a precedent that staff and mayor will make decisions as to who's on.
But I don't think that
That's
was their
not the
intention.
process.
I don't think that was their intention.
But they said that was their intention.
Can I ask, Mayor, can you clarify what you were just saying? I just
So
want
there's mayor request committees and there's other committees. Chief has been wanting a public safety committee for quite a while, and Chief, you're welcome to pipe in. He came to me wanting to get it started sooner rather than later. The retreat is not scheduled till February. That work, according to him, he wanted to get started early. Mayors can request committees, as can council. This isn't technically a standing committee at this point. This is a request that's coming from administration for 3 people to come on and start the work. And I have the authority to ask anybody I want to work on any issue I want.
This is a standing committee.
I
It
think
is not,
that's where
at
I'm-
this point, it's not.
in our code, I thought, that's why I'm confused, hold on, let me just clarify one quick thing.
These are the issues that Chief is asking to address right now. There will be more issues that come up as council determines your council committee procedures.
I'm a little confused still, I just want clarification because we do have, I think, isn't there one called public safety as a standing committee in our code?
It's
That's why I'm getting
It
confused, so you're
is in
saying this is
code,
different?
however, there is also the authority to create committees as necessary from the mayor's side.
So if this will help, I pulled up our Duval Municipal Code,
Okay.
and there's some very specific things, and I've seen both ways, where the mayor or city manager or city administrator comes forward and says, we really need a special committee, and it can be an ad hoc committee, or it can be, a standing committee that hasn't been realized, because not all standing committees are actually staffed. So I'll just read this, because I think here's where we're at. I think it'll be helpful. So this is under Duval Municipal Code, standing committees, and it says, A, standing committees will meet as necessary. The standing committee shall be Finance and Administration Committee, Land Use Committee, Public Works Committee, Public Safety Committee, Economic Development Committee.
This is a
Item
standing
B,
committee that
yeah.
she's trying to form.
So this is item B, standing committee shall consist of not more than 3 council members each. The standing committee shall consider and may make policy and legislative recommendations to the city council. The council will decide amongst themselves who will serve on each committee and who the chair of the committee will be. Generally, council committee membership will be determined by which city council members are available to serve on said committees, as determined by the standing committee meeting day and time. And then it goes into ad hoc committees and others. It's not unusual for a mayor or others to come forward and say, hey, we'd like to do it, but you can see that at the end of the
We
day,
can change the name. I mean, if that's what it's, if it boils down to the name being the same as the standing committee, it's simple to change the name until the standing committees are established.
Yeah.
And so the work can begin.
so Jennifer and then Dot.
So my issue is the statement that this somehow is not one of these committees, this is a mayor's committee, and in that case, the mayor gets to choose who's on the committee. That's what you said. So could you tell me where in our code it says that? I guess I've never heard
You
of
don't
a
have
committee
to-
that
you don't
is
have to
called by
have
the
a
mayor
code,
and that they
right?
get to choose council members.
Okay, so you don't have to have code to call a committee as mayor. I can ask people to serve on any committee that I want to, within, that are outside of the committees that you all choose. If I need something special,
Outside of what we've chosen.
I can ask. So what I'm saying here is that you can also change, if you don't like the name of it, we can say Public Safety Advisory Committee until at which point the standing committees are established. But the fact remains that we have a need right now that's being requested, and has been requested by a department head for several months. He's asking for this assistant. I have the authority to ask people to do it, and that's what I'm doing, and we are bringing it to you. And so I see that as being open and transparent in the discussion. And when you guys decide, get your committee structures formed out, you can change the membership of the committee, but this is what we've asked for to start right now. Or you can call it a task force, as Hillary's saying. Another thing, instead of advisory, you can call it a task force. There are issues that the chief is asking to start working on now. And it is well within my authority to ask members of the public, members of the business community, or members of the council to work with staff on issues. And that's what we're doing.
I guess I have a question for Chief Hurd. I'm looking at your list,
That's fine.
and there are several things on here that do deal with finance. And one of the first things, I didn't know if these were in order of priority. But there are some things that relate to finance. And so I'm looking for a way to not disrupt the process, but if there's something here that finance can at least look at in advance that might be able to start the process without disrupting the authority of the council and the process the council by code is supposed to follow for establishing committees. So I'm looking for a way to start helping you without going through all this other stuff, essentially.
So the other thing, if folks are not comfortable with and don't want to serve on the committee because you want to wait for the February process, you are welcome to decline the invitation. So there's nobody telling anybody that they have to do anything. It was a request. It was an ask.
So
Council, I think Chief Hurd.
Yeah, I just-
No, Mayor, stop. No, everybody stop for a second. Mayor, there's several times that you've jumped in, and I don't do this very often, but we do have Robert's Rules of Order, and probably about half the time you've spoken, you were not recognized. So out of respect for the council and the CAL process, and you as well, I just need to make sure that everybody will be recognized, allow people to speak one at a time. The purpose for that is so we don't get into this talking over top of each other and not listening to the other side. So this is very respectful. The last thing I want to say, and I'm hesitant to say it, but I'm going to need to say it. I'm really sad right now. I've talked to other council members. I've been aware that the chief asked for very specific people, but I'm also understanding that there's been a lot of friction with the mayor. And so tonight, I had set up purposely, after talking to other council members, to make sure that council was aware of the request, but council could choose who they wanted to be on the committee. So I appreciate that the mayor wanted to bring up and say, hey, this is my request, it's not, I'm sad because I think we were down in a spot where we could do both. We could appreciate the chief had a request, the mayor was supportive of it, and the council could go ahead and move forward. I expect most likely the 3 people the chief had recognized that, he'd like to have on there would go through. But again, we find ourselves in a position of arguing over who's got, who's in charge. And I think that's really sad. It's sad because the chief has a very legitimate request. I appreciate that the mayor wanted to move that forward. But we just once again get into this fighting with each other. And I think it's absolutely foolish and unnecessary. I think that, I get the dynamic. Council would like to support that and move forward, but when you feel like you're pushed up against the wall and you're not being respected for your role, responsibility, and decision, it's kind of painful. So that's the way I see the dynamic. So how do we move beyond that? The mayor has a very straightforward request, so I'm just going to put it on the table. Are there any members of council that would like to be on that committee with those 3 members? The other opportunity would be, say, no, we'll decline that, but we as a committee or a council can go ahead and say, we're going to move forward, assigning. It seems a little foolish, but I get the dynamic. But I would like, if council agrees to move forward, I think having that committee would be great. I just think we get into this push-pull and it gets to be painful for me to watch. And I don't know how else to put it. It just, I would like us to go ahead and form a committee, and as the rules say, council gets to decide who's on there. The mayor is right. She can also request it and say, hey, I'd like to do it. I think it's sad we're in this dynamic because it tears us apart when I think if we are just trying to put the committee together to support public safety, everybody's on board with that. Well, there's timing and rules and who's going to be on it. We can work through that. We're grown-ups and this is pretty basic, but somehow we get into this dynamic where we're fighting. Yes,
It's
Michelle.
because, look at that. Number 1, standing committees. This was brought to us as a standing committee, and the code has not been followed. Simple as that. It has nothing to do with me wanting to be on the committee, that I'm not supporting the 3 of you being on the committee. It's the process, and we can't continue that process.
Yeah, I understand
That's
that.
simple, just
No.
very simple.
I do. So, I still just deeply respect what the chief is trying to do. He recognizes there's a lot on the table. We have standing committees. Would we like to staff it? And that's really where we're at. I'm happy to postpone it now because of all the stuff going on, but I'm also happy to entertain if folks want to move forward. I mean, certainly, and I'm happy to be on the committee. I love that kind of work and deeply respect the chief, but I also respect my fellow council members. If somebody else, I was that way with the finance. I hoped to be on the finance, but we had 3 well-qualified folks, so I was happy to step back as well. So, but I want to be practical here. Our job is to move forward the business of the city and support it, both with policy and with finance and with budget. And I hate to have us not move forward with it, even in the midst of all of this. I think that there's some wisdom in, trying to earlier than later put together a committee. Diane?
I totally agree with you, Mayor Pro Tem, in what you have just stated in regards to us working together, cooperatively, collaborating. The most important thing about this and this committee to me is the fact that the chief has the support he needs to get all of these things done. And that's why I'm supporting this idea. And I think, yes, if the question is the whole policy and how we do what we do, we can certainly work through that. But what we have in front of us is a staff person and some very important things that have to get done. And I think we can make this decision and support the staff because that's in the best interest of the city.
Yeah.
I just want to finish what I tried to do, which is simply say, for Chief Hurd, there is an existing finance committee, and we're having a situation moving into next year where Dana will be working on other things, and finance has been typically meeting twice a month, doing a lot of lifting there. And, we're trying to give her some space to do her stuff. So there's really no reason why, if there's something you need to brief us on the finance committee, to bring us up to date sooner. The finance committee, which exists, can hear from you and have information sooner than later. Because one of the things that helps us on finance is having that information sooner than later. Certainly, as we finish up getting information from Dana on 2019, and we're looking at 2020, and we've got a lot of potential things we're gonna have to work through at the end of the first quarter. The faster personally, the faster I have information from you on some of the things that are money related, just in sort of what you're seeing in that terrain, the happier I am. I mean, I'm not trying to speak for my college, and that does not disrupt this committee thing. We're an existing committee, we can meet with you and talk, get information from you, and that helps us be better positioned when this committee gets going. That's what I was trying to say.
I do think there's crossover, Dot, but I think that there's probably enough on this list.
Yeah, there's some money things on
Yeah.
here that were mentioned.
I get the trepidation sometimes when you feel like you're being asked to do something and don't feel like you necessarily have a choice on who's on there. I don't want that to supersede our desire as a council to show support for public safety and be able to have a public safety committee with 3 members assigned. I'm open to council choosing who they want. As the mayor said, if you want to decline that offer, we can decline it. But my sense is we agree we would like to have a public safety committee at some point. And it sounds like the sooner the better, probably in January versus February. Is council amenable to looking at moving forward with a public safety committee and council members tonight selecting who they'd like to be on it? Matt?
I'm fine with moving forward and identifying who will be on this committee for January. I guess I would just add the caveat that I think we should just, look at it as, I think we should all agree to revisit the makeup of the committee, the next couple of months and see how things are going. So I think it's important to reiterate Councilmember Hoag's point. I mean, process is important, and understanding roles is very important, and just muddling through is it's not acceptable, and I think it really has been the nexus for many of Duval's problems and many of Duval's inability to get ahead of itself. And I think my interest is to effectively see committees be used effectively and not recreate ecosystems that foster the same kind of compartmentalization and issues that were just occurred in recent history. In the grand scheme of things, it was not that long ago, and which led to not being able to have committees and going back to the committee of the whole. I believe lack of communication and lack of clear roles and responsibilities was partially to do with that, having too much gray area. And I think these are very simple issues, and your point is well taken. It is painful, and I am sympathetic to that point. Whereas I don't necessarily want to be on this committee, but I see the value in forcing the recognition that you can have a blue ribbon committee that does all kinds of things for the community or does things, but these committees are explicitly designed to move through legislation and communicate with the council. That's the role that they fulfill. They're not a community organization committee, they're not a blue ribbon committee to solve a problem. It's specifically to move legislation to the council and advise the council. Now, I just think that yes, it is a crazy argument to have, but I will have that argument, and I'm frustrated at times when the waters continuously are sought. Continuously, I feel like it's a muddying of the waters in terms of what's going on. But it is painful, yes. I don't have the time at this moment to be on this committee, and I see these issues are pretty succinct, and hopefully we can get through them, and this committee would facilitate this moving through the council as a body. But I would say that in the interest of stressing the point of how these councils are formed and the purpose of these councils is that we might need to set up a process where we revisit this issue and we talk about it from time to time. And if that means we have to talk about it again in February, then we'll have this conversation again in February. So at this time, I do not wish to be on this council. That does not mean that I don't reserve the right to put myself in a position to show interest or express my desire to council to be on this committee at a later date, primarily in February or February or later in the year when we make a more succinct push to establish these councils or these committees. So with that, I would hope that we can move on from this.
Well said, Matt, I appreciate that. We made several good points in there. One thing I don't want to lose is I watched it, the chief's part about going, and that gets lost in this process. But he really wanted to improve communication with council and be able to involve council as well. The mayor certainly saw the value in that as well. So we get into this where it just gets muddled, and I'm so sad because I think we all kind of at the end want the same thing, to have a council committee and have it be involved and be able to have better communication. So it's really a win-win. But when we get caught up in this process and who can do what, that saddens me. I don't think it furthers the business of our city and our citizens. So I hear some concern. Go ahead, Amy.
So I just want to make sure I understand what I'm hearing and kind of agree to do whatever the council wants. And I share that sadness because I think we were close, but that's in the past. So if anyone is uncomfortable with that structure, then I am happy to decline and just start up our standing committee, because I think what I'm hearing is people are okay with this happening sooner rather than later. Maybe I'm wrong, but the issue is with the process and wanting to just start our standing committee. Is that kind of what I'm hearing, that you would rather? No, I know.
Described as the standing
Yeah,
committee.
so rather than the mayor's request committee,
It should have been,
so rather than the mayor's request
I was
committee.
gonna say, it should have been, that's hindsight's 2020. It should have been on there as administrative request committee instead of standing committee, because that's what it started out as. So I think that, in general, a week between meetings, especially when you don't have a lot of time and people are out of the office, these things get difficult, and sometimes the words may not have the exact intent. And I think that that's what really created all of this issue to begin with. And so, again, I didn't hear any concerns about this before, so, it's really the intent is to get the work started and get it going. Council's doing their standing committees, you're doing your procedures for that. But we have a need for staff to get the processes rolling.
Can we change the name? Then in February, a standing committee, and rework the standing committee, can we do that?
Well, I think we could, but I think we're losing the point here. You know, I think council wants to have a standing committee, the chief's, I don't know that she cares what it's called, he just wants to be able to interact and have, you know, council involved and be able to get a lot of these items. And on top of that, I think this is as much about having good communication and making sure that we don't have miscommunication that gets in our way. And I think we've already seen with the finance committee that there's a lot of opportunity for good communication. It's not easy communication, but I think it does open the door. You know, again, I'd like to go back. I'd love to be able to put the standing committee together. You know, I think there's 3 of us who would like to be on. If council feels in any way that this is something being shoved down our throat, you don't have a choice. But as Mayor Pro Tem, you know, that's not the direction I'm taking. I'm asking, does council, by our city code, want to staff 3 council members on a public safety standing committee? It mayor's need, it meets the chief's need, it meets our need, and we can move forward pretty quickly. I don't want to lose sight of what Jennifer had said, that, you know, what about other committees, and certainly Matt's right. I think at our retreat, we can certainly say, here's our committees. Anybody want to change? Are we dying to get the economic committee started? I think that's important to do every single year. If you have standing committees, let's take a look and see. The fact that we're starting them different times of the year doesn't mean at the first of the year, which is what's prescribed, that we take a look and say, how are we doing? You know, do we want to, you know, stop a committee, start a committee, who's on it? I think that's just a reasonable question. So I don't want to lose sight of what we're trying to accomplish. I get the process, but you know, that's that practical part of wanting to move forward and have a
I think we
question.
should just, I mean, establish the standing committee and like I said, revisit its membership when we get around to the rest of the standing committees.
So we don't make definitive decisions at the COW, but just by looking for kind of a show of hands and interest, how many city council members are interested in starting sooner, probably in February, with a public safety standing committee? And in terms of staffing, who would like to be on that committee? I throw my name in the hat. Any others that would like to be on it between now and when we decide? So if everybody's okay, we'll plan on moving forward. There's ways to formally do this. I think Jody has mentioned 2 or 3 different ways that we could do it. But I think this allows us to get it started, and then we can come back and formalize that, most likely at a city council member, and just recognizing it. I do appreciate the open conversation, and Mayor, I know that these are tough to have, but my job as Mayor Pro Tem is to try to, at this meeting, allow everybody to have input. You know, Matt, I think, kind of summed up the sentiment. You know, this doesn't feel good, but I think that we came up with a solution that allows us to move forward. And if nothing else, we can learn from it and try to move forward. I do think the mayor does have a right to be able to say, hey, we'd like to have a special committee, ad hoc committee. There's many different committees, structures that are available. But because of some of the tensions we have, this one kind of erupted tonight, and I feel bad about that. But I do appreciate council's providing direction, that we have 3 formal council members that will be on that public safety committee. And that, again, according to the rules that we have set, the first time the committee meets, committee can decide on who would be a chair and then move forward there. And then we can review it later and maybe even in February. Well, thank you, council. Michelle, go ahead. And Jennifer, additional input?
Mine was just that I supported starting the standing committee as defined in our code, and that I think, you know, revisit in February.
I think we can do that, clearly.
Since that seems to be decided, can we go on to the next agenda item?
We
Because we
can.
have less than 20
Yeah.
minutes.
Well, thank you. I didn't expect expect that to go more than about 5 or 10 minutes, but we did. So our next item is amend Duval Municipal Code 4-08 for discussion. I don't know if everybody has a copy or has seen a copy of the new language, and that is on council for committee or for discussion or decision. Has everybody seen the revised language? I can read it real quickly, it's just one paragraph.
And I was gonna say, I do have a small amendment to what was proposed.
Why don't you bring that up first, Scott?
And I did work with Hillary on this because I wanted to make sure that, you know, I didn't really, this is a little different than some of the other things I've looked at before. So I worked with Hillary on it. It's a very small change, and I have just emailed it to Jody. And what it does is it adds a whereas, which I can read to you. And it also does, what it makes clear in the area where it says, all requests to rewrite a position job description shall be made in writing by the respective department head to the chief administrative officer, which is the mayor. The administrative officer, the ad is, the administrative officer will provide the city council with prompt written notice of any such change. The emphasis here, I want to be sure everybody understands, is this does not get us in the business of writing job descriptions. It does not change the mayor's authority to do so. All it does is put in the code that when that happens, we're going to get a copy. And the value of that, particularly in finance, is when we get hit with stuff like in chunks, it's much harder to track those changes with what's going on financially. And at least this is my view. And so the more we can, on this interim basis, where we don't have a lot of detail, establish that requirement, I'm trying to think, it gives us all the assurance that when those things happen, we're gonna know what they are. And when you don't know when things are, that's when people tend to go like this. So that's the only thing, I mean, Hillary, you please correct me if what I just read was incorrect. I have given Jody, I mean, I just sent it to her. I don't know if people have their phones, I can send it on.
So-
What I did with this is after I worked with Hillary, I sent it to the finance committee and to Matthew Wire with a do not reply. So that the finance committee, which originated the rescission, would know what my comment was. And then to Matthew Wire, because he was the one that proposed an amendment. So that's why I did it the way I did, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I should just send it all out without having
Overall,
notified them first.
So Dot, so you have language to insert. Does that replace the last portion that was new, which says all requests to reclassify a position from one pay range to another shall be made in writing by the respective department head to the chief administrative officer for approval by the city council? Does what you're inserting replace
Maybe
that?
Hillary,
Or is it as?
she probably has it in front of her.
I don't have it.
Okay, let me just read what Hillary provided me.
So-
On one of the, you can look at your thing there. On the item where it says, whereas the city council finds it to be in the best interest of the city to ensure the stability of the budget by reviewing and formally approving by resolution any reclassification of decisions and changes to position titles to ensure compliance within the established city budgets. I believe that is how it's drafted now. Is that not correct?
I don't have that one in front of me.
It is, okay. And then what you added, Hillary, was this whereas.
So this is what we received as council in our packet.
So what we added was, whereas the city council finds it to be in the best interest of the city to ensure the stability of the budget, to be promptly informed of any decision by the mayor to change job descriptions. So it establishes it in the whereas. And then in the code itself, what it adds is all requests to rewrite a position's job description shall be made in writing by the respective department head to the chief administrative officer. I believe that is very consistent with what's already there.
Yeah,
It goes on then to say, the administrative officer, this is the change, will provide the city council with prompt written notice of any such change. That's the communication piece that I noticed in the draft would help strengthen the dialogue in this interim amendment.
so it looked like the new language would replace the underlying language that we received in our budget packet.
I can, yeah.
And then after that, there's some additional things that would be unchanged because it's
Yeah.
existing and it just says
It's a really small
reclassification
change.
takes place under 4 different circumstances. So I think what you're requesting, that new language would replace the underlying section that we received in our packet.
Most of which is not a change, it's just that one piece.
It's just the way we were, yeah.
So the one thing I wanted to clarify is when you were reading that whereas, you said something about job titles as well.
No, there's the first one, position titles, as is my understanding, is in there now. Shall I read?
Read the whereas back to
Okay.
me, because that's the one where I think you added job titles that's not currently in the amended.
No, this is where, in what Hillary sent me, and I can go back to her email, I do not believe this is changed, but maybe I'm not
I'm
remembering.
reading what's in the
Okay,
packet, so,
sure.
and
Let
I
me
want to
read
compare
this.
it to what you're reading.
Whereas, this is the first one, whereas the city council finds it to be in the best interest of the city to ensure the stability of the budget by reviewing and formally approving by resolution any reclassification decisions and changes to position
Right there.
titles.
The and positions, and changes to position titles is not in the version that went out in the packet.
Okay, so this is an underline on what I had from Hillary, so I'm just reading what I got from Hillary.
Okay, so I just
so-
want to make sure that
Yeah,
council talks about
that's
that
fine,
part
yeah,
too.
that's cool. And then to ensure compliance within established city budgets. The additional whereas was the second one, which addresses, it's in the best interest of the city to ensure the stability of the budget, to be promptly informed of any decision by the mayor to change job descriptions. Because when job descriptions change, it has a ripple impact, and, which may or may not affect the budget, but you don't necessarily know that.
Right, I just want to make sure that council understands that what you read as the whereas and what is in the agenda bill or in the amended packet ordinance or resolution ordinance are different. So if job titles is also going to become a part of the discussion, we just probably need to maybe talk about each of these topics,
So there's
like
other,
these 3 things
input, Michelle?
separately.
I would like to see what I'm looking at is actually the code, well, the part that talks about the change of the code. I think the change of position title should be moved to the sentence, so that's also to be approved by the city council. And I don't know if your copy had that.
Yeah, I can just show you, I mean, I can flip it here and you can take a look. And I cut and pasted from Hillary's email to me, so if I cut and paste it,
I just
correct
found
it.
that.
Did I do it right?
So the first whereas is amended, I added a second whereas, and then the text of the code is revised.
Right.
And I don't know if you have access to putting something up there, but that might be the easiest way to look at it.
Yeah, one of the things I see happens, one is we're running out of time. The other thing that is some challenging with changing language, if everybody gets it, fine. But if people don't get it, it gets kind of confusing as to exactly what
Right,
changed. So tonight at council, it's up for discussion or decision. My sense is that we probably need to revise this.
Yeah.
We're not in a big hurry. One of the things I did appreciate, I don't know if everyone saw it because it came out probably about 4 o'clock, but the mayor sent a note just verifying in writing that, her intent was not to make changes, to add positions. She was very specific about city administrator. I want to work with council, make sure that we have the money before anything ever goes out. So I think she was trying to be very specific and helpful with our request that she do that. So I appreciate her doing that. So I don't feel like we're in a big hurry to put it through. So anyway, my only suggestion is that we consider saying we can bring this back at another council meeting to look at the language. If everybody's comfortable, we can move forward.
I'm willing to withdraw what I proposed to get this decided. I just thought it would help with, trying to be more clear about communication. If the mayor is willing to commit verbally to getting us the changes in the job description, then, I guess we don't need my change. And we can move this forward and make a decision tonight.
I actually like your first whereas. Oh,
Well,
sorry.
it was me, Diane, and then Matt, and then Michelle.
Okay, first off, because this is pretty, a big change in my opinion, and I think it's more a question to legal, when we're talking about reclassification, rewriting job descriptions, and now we're talking titles, and I'm a little concerned about liability for, like as a council member, I don't feel I have the professional ability to make those type of decisions clearly to the best degree for the city. So, I'm like, how do I vote on something like that? And then my concern, I want to I think we should really, if we're going to do this kind of change, we should really work through it so that we're covered as council people. I don't want to be liable for I'm looking at some decisions that is my responsibility in this, and that's pretty exposed. And when we're talking negotiating and working with unions and stuff, this is another thing that is deeply concerning to me with job descriptions, reclassifying wages, that sort of thing. So I want to just be 100% clear, what are we doing? How are we doing this? And I don't want it to be a liability for us that we didn't realize and later like, oh my, what, I didn't know. And so I feel it's a really delicate area to be working with.
I think that's partly what Dot was working on, some language, so that we're not into the job description writing, but just having that kind of final approval. Matt?
I like the addition. I think we should not be in the titles and description. That would be something that would be administratively.
So you like Dot's?
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. I think it's, I think it gets to the basics of it, and I'd be fine if we can, sounds like, just sort that out, get it synced up with the packet for the 1st of January. And,
Yeah. Michelle?
I changed to the first whereas that you read. I still feel like the code itself, where it says change a position job title, that needs to be moved down to where we approve it. That's where that needs to be.
Matt?
I just think it's tough because there's a lot of, so you could be a stormwater tech and they want to call you a stormwater specialist. And then there is some of that in terms of classification, and
You can change your salaries substantially.
it could potentially, but sometimes it's my understanding it can be a way of kind of, if you have a job description that's very similar to other job descriptions, and obviously if you call it something different, or sometimes it's just for clarity of the position. I think potentially we could look at this as a compromise that we can, that we had a very specific concern, and that we can listen and hear and not go all the way to one side.
And then Jennifer?
Let's not forget sort of why this came on. This is about two things right now. The first thing is that our existing code, done in 1989, when the city was 2,700 people, needs to be clarified in this area. There's a lot in human resources and all kinds of stuff that's changed since then. And the purpose of this is to create an interim step. I think that was your comment or something like that at the last council meeting, to essentially create a framework for right now, with the intent that there will be additional changes to the code that do exactly what you're referring to, because there are things like, work creep and shifts and the emphasis here really is on a reclassification, I'm not rethinking the technical side of her reclassification. It's just that the mayor comes forward, she lets us know about the reclassification, we can assess budget impact, both short-term and otherwise, and on a budget basis, give a determination such that we know we can afford that position, not just in that moment in time, but moving forward. I mean, that's how this whole thing evolved. And there will be a time, and maybe fairly soon, where we come back with some additional, exactly what you're saying, really kind of flesh it out. But right now, we don't have those guardrails. And so without the guardrails, it goes back to your earlier point. You end up in a lot of muddy water. And so that's why this was done. You could take, as a council, much more extreme measures, but that doesn't seem to be, this might be a simpler way to create some guardrails for all of us, and then we can move forward with a much more robust code change. Because we have other robust code
So we're
changes.
down to 3. Jennifer, can you give us about a 60-second?
So I think the reclassification is a bit of a no-brainer for me. Other cities do it. It seems, part of our responsibility to manage the budget, to keep an eye on reclassifications. Job description, job titles, just something that, send us an email, say FYI. I think it'd be helpful to be written in code just to have that expectation there. If you're changing someone's title, if you're changing their job description, timely notice to council, just give us an FYI. I'm completely comfortable with that. So the only change between what was put in the packet and what I'm saying is just adding in there notification of council on
I
those,
like
the
that.
job
That's that
description
perfect.
and the job title. Just let us know. If we see problems with that, like creeping into requiring classifications, at least we'll have seen the trail of how it happened.
So is everybody okay with not making a decision tonight? Now, it's still on the council agenda, so we can pull it from the agenda and move it to January. We can leave it on the agenda and just say, we've had the discussion, we're gonna add some additional language, and then we'll bring, that way we don't need to actually remove it, we can just, make clear in the public meeting that we understand there's additional language we're looking at, we're not in a hurry, let's continue to work on the language with council and the attorney, and then be able to come back in January
I
with.
think we've already got the language.
Yeah,
Are you
this
good
was
with
done with Hillary. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't
Okay,
go out
if
of
you're
that.
good with that, then we can just
No, I
move
mean,
forward.
and I do, if we're gonna delay it tonight, I really think that ambiguity right now is not helping us. And so then I would really want to see this voted on in that first meeting. Frankly, I would prefer to get it over with.
Yeah.
We already debated this ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And so, it would be nice just to move it, and understanding there's gonna be a more robust, thoughtful, with finance and everybody else's input into the deeper
Okay.
code change.
So I
That's my
misunderstood, so we're
preference,
looking at
but
moving forward
I don't want
with,
it delayed any.
I'm a
So-
no.
so you're, no,
I'm
so,
not, no.
but it sounds like everyone else is comfortable with the current language, with the understanding that we'll be coming back later with some.
With her language. So
So
it's
do
not
you
what's in
want-
the packet.
So I'm trying to make sure I'm clear. So do you want to insert that? So when we have the discussion with council, we want to insert that language, and then we can vote on it.
Can we make sure and get that put up on the?
I will work on trying, I don't have a laptop in front of me, but,
That's the only thing I am comfortable with the language discussed, but it seems like there's a draft lag here going on. I just want to make sure we get
I
that
don't
figured.
have
We
a
can
CAE laptop.
We can
That's
get
not
that
mine,
figured out in
so
there.
I'll
But-
borrow Steve's or,
Oh,
So
sure.
right
and
now,
that's
we're looking
good.
at bringing it to
You
you
can
later.
borrow Steve's and
Okay,
put
so
it up on-
our meeting is officially adjourned.
Absolutely.
That's the page that she's got, right? I don't need to.
yeah, but I have it on